Hello, nice to see you. Not quite. Um, just to introduce myself, I'm Cathy Batt and I'm an admissions tutor for undergraduate archaeology and forensic sciences. And because I'm not very good at multitasking, I've also got a colleague, Dr. Ben Jennings, who's in the room as well and will be able to answer any questions you have as the talk goes along. But also at the end of this, I'll be over in Unibody with a number of student ambassadors and other members of staff. So if you've got questions about archaeology and forensics at Bradford, then come along and listen to what we've got to say there and have a chat to us. Sorry. Okay, just a little bit about me to start with, about the presentation. Really appreciate you logging in to come and see what we've got to offer. Going to university is a really big decision, so I hope I can give you enough information in this to make that decision, to see what we've got to offer at Bradford. I'm actually an archaeological scientist. I specialise in dating, which is not quite as exciting as it sounds. So I work on telling you how old things are, and those might be archaeological objects like the fireplace here that I've worked on, or forensic materials. But I'm also the admissions tutor, so I can answer all those questions about your UCAS statement, or how many points, or what qualifications we accept, and all that sort of thing. What we would normally do is say, come and see us, because we've got fabulous facilities, really enthusiastic staff and students, but obviously you can't at the moment. So I hope to give you a bit of a flavour of it here. But if there's anything specific you want to ask, come over to Unibody afterwards, but also just drop me an email and I'll be able to tell you anything a bit more detailed. I wanted to start by saying something about why I think we're special. I'm kind of hoping that you can see that text and that this isn't in the way. There we go. So why we think we're special. I know this sounds a bit bragging, but actually I genuinely believe we do things that are special. So I think the key things about coming to Bradford is we do lots of hands-on experience. You'll get lots of practical experience. We've got outstanding facilities for that. The teaching's really good. Don't take my word for it. Talk to our current students, and they'll tell you about the teaching here. We have a placement year, and that's really rare on archaeological and forensic courses, and I'll tell you a bit more about that as we go through. And there are jobs. Now, quite a lot of people think, oh, archaeology or forensics, that's a really interesting thing to do at university, but it's a bit indulgent because you'll never get a job at the end of it. It's not true. Almost all of our graduates are in jobs within 6 months, and I'll talk a bit about which jobs those are as we go through. I think that's quite closely linked to the fact we have a placement year, so you do a year of work, you can choose to do a year of work experience during the course. So those are really important things about it, and I think the other thing that's really important about what's special about Bradford is that our teaching is underpinned by staff research. The government assesses universities' research, and last time they did an assessment, we were in the top 3 for the impact of our research. That means how our research is used outside of universities. So how relevant it is to the real world. So we're in the top 3. We were above Oxford and Cambridge. So we're quite proud of that. And you'll see that the research we do comes through in all our undergraduate courses as well. So that's why I think we're special. And what I'm going to do is expand on each of those topics a bit over the next 15 minutes or so. So in terms of hands-on experience, hands-on practical experience, outstanding facilities. We have 4 floors in the main university building, and please do come and visit when you get the chance. We have a floor of biological anthropology, a floor of archaeology, a floor of forensic archaeology, and a floor that's entirely full of crime scene simulations. It's probably the creepiest floor in the university. You know, the first room on the right is the murder in the bedsit. The second room on the left is the drugs den. The third room on the right is the break-in at the computer shop, and they're all set up crime scenes for people to practice those skills in. So we have lots of facilities. We've got the largest collection of human remains in an archaeology department in the country. So that's over 4,000 skeletons. We've got an anatomy table, you'll see on the left here, for teaching human anatomy without having to cut up bodies. We teach 3D visualization. We've got lots of equipment for that. We even have our own boat. And these are all things that you'll get to use if you come as a student. They're not just for research, they're also used for undergraduate teaching. We also have lots of less technical items. We have wheelbarrows and excavation equipment and flesh-eating beetles. That's another story for another day. So lots of facilities. In terms of archaeology undergraduate, well, in terms of undergraduate courses, we run 2 archaeology programs, a BSc in archaeology and a BSc in forensic archaeology and anthropology. And you can do them both as a 3-year straight degree or a 4-year with a placement. There's also a foundation year. So if you don't have the entry qualifications to get in this year, there's a foundation year option that will lead you into those. We also run a BSc in Forensic and Medical Science and a BSc in Forensic Sciences, which is dealt with by a different talk. But if you want to ask questions about that in Unibuddy, I can provide you with a bit more information on those as well. In terms of the differences between the courses, basically archaeology is the study of people in the past. So we look at what people did in the past through what they left behind. We look at their possessions, their pottery, we look at their buildings, we look at their bodies. And we look at that through all different periods and different cultures, places across the world. What we do in forensic archaeology and anthropology is the same sort of techniques, but we apply them to forensic cases rather than archaeological cases. So a medico-legal context of investigation. So that might be recording crime scenes, locating crime scenes, excavating buried materials, interpreting human remains again. And you can imagine that there's a lot of overlap between those 2 subjects. It's just the period that we cover is quite different. The entry for both courses is 112 points, or the equivalent. And there's a specific science requirement if you're going to do the BSc Forensic Archaeology and Anthropology, but not a science requirement for the BSc Archaeology. Don't worry if you haven't done any science before or that you don't like, you find science intimidating, don't worry. We'll teach you enough to do what you need on the course. In terms of the degree structure, I'm not going to talk in detail about all the different modules because I haven't got time. But there's details of that on the website. And if you've got specific things you're interested in, you can ask about them in the Q&As. There's such a variety of modules, it would take me the rest of the talk to just go through what's on offer. Broadly speaking, the first year is an introduction to the subject. Not many people have studied these subjects before they come to university. So it's an introduction covering a range of topics to get everybody to the same point. In the second year, you get more choices, more chance to develop degree pathways. So you get to look at things in more detail. If you do a placement year, that comes between the second and the final year. And then in the final year, more options, more chance to specialise, and particularly a really big individual project. So you take all the things that you've been interested in, everything you've learned up to that point, plus perhaps your placement year, if you've done a placement year, and pick a subject that you particularly are interested in working on, and you work with a member of staff using fantastic facilities we've got on something that is very individual to you, a particular research project of interest to you. So that's how the degree is broadly structured. There's a couple of specific points in it that are good to know about. There's a field experience. So if you're doing the BSc Archaeology, there's a 3-week field course between the first and the second year, which is compulsory for archaeology, because it's really important to know where archaeological data comes from, and optional for forensic archaeology and anthropology. And these are all projects that are connected with research. We don't just say, oh, let's go and dig up a field for the fun of it. They are projects where you are part of a research team investigating a serious archaeological question. So you work alongside archaeological professionals as well. And that might be local. We've had projects on Belden Moor, which I can kind of see out my window. But we've also had projects in Portugal, in Kenya, in Shetland. And at the moment, we've got a really big project running in Orkney, and that's what the picture's of, a project on the island of Rousay. Those are really good for understanding where the data comes from, but also really good for teamwork. And when employers say they want to look for team building skills, your ability to work in a team, this is the sort of thing you can quote as your team experience. I'll say a little bit more about the placement. So that, as I mentioned, the placement comes between the second and the final year. It's optional, you don't have to do it. But people who have done it have found it really valuable. It gives you academic credit, you get a diploma for it, but much more than that, it gives you the chance to work within a professional environment in the area you're interested in. So it gives you contacts, it gives you a really enhanced CV. So when you graduate, you've not only got a degree, but you've also got work experience as well. And it really helps you finalise what you're most interested in. Generally speaking, we encourage people to do 2 periods of 6 months, so they get a bit of a variety. It's not charged at the same fee as the other years. At the moment, it's 1/10 of the fee, so it doesn't have the same financial impact, and some placements are paid. The example I've got on there is on the slide is a student called Ella Fiteria, who just gives you a picture of what you could do with placement. So Ella Fiteria is a Greek student who came to Bradford to study forensic archaeology and anthropology, and she did her placement in Melbourne, in the Stable Isotope Labs at La Trobe University in Melbourne. And that really came about because we've been running the placement scheme for 40 years. We've got lots of people who've graduated who did the placement, and the person who runs the Isotope Lab in Melbourne is a Bradford graduate. And he wrote to us and said, I had a really good time at Bradford. The best thing I did was the placement. I want to give something back. Would you like to send a placement student? And curiously, we had quite a lot of people who fancied a year in Australia. So there was that placement opportunity was offered. What I would say is if you think you might want to do a placement, then I would apply for a 4-year course at this stage. You can always change your mind later on, but it's much easier to change your mind and say you want less money from Student Finance England than say you want more money. So if you're in doubt, apply for the 4-year at this stage. The vocational placement year is not an opportunity you'll get on most archaeology and forensic courses in the country. And it's very much something we see as a unique offering from Bradford. Just to give you a snapshot of the kind of placements are available, this is a list of forensic related placements in recent years. And the student in the picture is Zishwan, who's a student who is taking one of our forensic courses, and he chose to do a year abroad, actually, a year of study abroad at the University of Northern Colorado. So he went there and took some of the courses there and travelled a bit in the States while he was there. And archaeology placements, again, a really wide range of opportunities. The picture's a student called Abby, who graduated a couple of years ago, and for her placement, she went and worked at Machu Picchu in Peru. Doesn't always have to be that exotic. I had a tutee a couple of years ago who worked for 9 months in Wakefield for her placement. And although Wakefield is not as exotic as Machu Picchu, what happened to her was her placement employers offered her a job as soon as she graduated. So she used that opportunity to get straight into employment. There are placements all over the world. We've lots of placements around the UK. You don't have to travel if you don't want to. There's quite a lot based in Bradford because there's quite a lot of interesting research going on in Bradford. But we have placements in the Faroe Islands, in Iceland, in Australia, in Kenya, in Nepal, and both coasts of America. Lots of opportunities, lots of possibilities there. Now, in terms of what our students think of us, I think that's a really important question. And what I would say is chat to the students. We've got students on Unibuddy now, but also after the event, who can tell you a little bit about how they found it. That's the best way of getting information on the course. But these are the sort of things that students have said in feedback, and mostly it reflects the fact that we're a very hands-on practical department, lots of field work, lots of opportunities in the laboratory, lots of opportunities with real material, and that we're quite a small course. So you really will get to know people very well. You'll get to know all of the staff teaching you. You'll have a personal tutor who will look after your interests. So it's quite a small studying community. And that's often quite attractive as well. In terms of employability, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are jobs. And actually, in both archaeology and forensics, there simply aren't enough qualified people. That's particularly relevant in archaeology. Archaeology is very tied to, professionally, is very tied to the construction industry. So there are lots of archaeologists, for example, working on HS2 and on all the infrastructure developments around that, infrastructure associated with housing developments, but also on the whole cultural heritage aspect of tourism, of museums, of presenting cultural heritage to the public, all those sorts of areas. Lots of work at the moment. And in 2017, we had 100% of our graduates were in work within 6 months, 92% of the forensics graduates. And I'll tell you a bit more about what they go into, what people actually do with these degrees. Basically, it breaks down into 3 things. You can use your degree directly. So go for a job that requires a degree in archaeology or forensic archaeology and anthropology. So that could be within the health service, could be within police scientific support labs for the forensic context, health and safety, museums, heritage, archaeological units, those sort of organisations. You can use your degree directly. It's directly relevant. Or you can use your degree to go into a related area. If you do a degree with us, what you'll come out at the end is a whole range of transferable skills. So you'll be able to work in a lab, you'll be able to work in the field, you'll be able to write scientific reports, you'll be able to gather data from lots of sources and write a discussive essay. You'll be able to work in a group, you'll be able to lead a team. You'll have all that different range of skills, and there are lots of jobs that look for that range of skills. So typically that might be things like writing, publishing, patenting, all those sort of areas, but also more broadly into retail, lots of professions that require a degree which shows that you are both numerate and literate. And the other area that lots of people go into is postgraduate study. What tends to happen is people suddenly discover that actually these are really interesting subjects, and 3 years or 4 years with a placement just isn't enough. So people then stay on and do postgraduate courses, either taught master's courses or PhD research or teacher training. A lot of people go into teacher training because actually these subjects are a really good foundation for teaching either history or straight science subjects at secondary schools or cross-curricular teaching at primary schools. Lots of people go into those sorts of areas. Plenty of opportunities there. And my final point on my, why think about Bradford, what we think is special about us, was the point about our teaching is underpinned by staff research. So if you come and visit us, what you'll discover is our staff are really enthusiastic about their subjects. Embarrassingly enthusiastic. We all love our subject, and we're really interested in it. And that comes through in the teaching. We're very high profile. There's a lot of, you will have seen us, likely to have seen us on television. Back, we did the early days of the Time Team, but also more recently, we've done quite a lot of episodes of things like Digging for Britain. There was a recent series on the archaeology of Stonehenge. And actually, as a spin-off from that, if you keep an eye on the press, on Monday, there's going to be quite an exciting story, an exciting press release around our work at Stonehenge to coincide with the solstice. I can't say any more at the moment, but have a look at the newspapers and the BBC website on Monday and you'll see what I've been talking about. So yes, I'll work here at Stonehenge, looking at the landscape there. I'll work in Kenya, looking for early hominid remains. There's been very high profile novel use of drone technology. Work with mummies, identifying the influence of drugs in the deposition, in the abandonment of mummies in Peru. Lots of areas like that, very high profile, and we're really interested in the research. I think you will be as well. And actually, as an undergraduate, that's really useful because you're talking to people who are doing research, and they'll bring the research into their teaching. It's all part of it. You can, if you want, volunteer to help out with processing research materials. So from our very high profile excavations, you can get involved in that as well. So you can be part of the team working on that sort of research as well. It's not something that goes on that's separate from our undergraduate teaching. This is a slide I quite like because this talks about the kind of people who will be teaching you if you come to study with us. So when you go to university, people don't just read a textbook and then give you a lecture on it. If you come here, what you find is that actually we write the books and give you a lecture on it as well. So this is a snapshot of book covers of books authored by people who teach within our department. My particular contribution is this very exciting volume down here called Analytical Chemistry and Archaeology, which is a real page turner. If you're suffering from insomnia, I definitely recommend it. But that's my particular area of research. So along with my colleagues, I've written a textbook on it, and that informs how I teach. And probably my final slide, what I wanted to say finally is something we're really proud of is both our league table positions and our accreditation. So if you look in the Complete University Guide for 2020, we're in the top 20 for archaeology and the top 3 for forensics. And you won't find any other department with that combination. But we're also accredited by the Chartered Society for Forensic Sciences and the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists. And accreditation's a really important badge, a really important seal of approval on the degree you're planning on doing. And that's the sort of thing you should be looking for when you look at courses, is whether they have professional accreditation. And all of our courses have professional accreditation, so I would say that's something worth thinking about. And that's something that's happened quite recently. You'd be the first year coming into a year with both sets of accreditation. I think that's all I wanted to say at the moment. So I'm just about inside my time. So I've got time for a bit of questions, if I can work out how to get to your questions. But otherwise, when we finish, please do come along to Unibuddy and we can have a bit of further chat there. We've already had a couple of hours of chat already, and there's some quite interesting questions and discussion there. So I will stop sharing. And that's me. And I think I shall wait for the host to tell me what to do next. Let's have a look. I'll try and look through the questions. Oh, here we go.
Hi, Cathy.
It's Ben. Hi there. Good.
Hi, you can hear me. So
I can hear you. Good.
A question from Napoli, which was asking about the potential impact of COVID-19 on teaching activities. So I was just explaining about how we're envisaging starting teaching on October 5th and using actively following government advice and NHS advice where issued and when issued, obviously the safety is paramount of students and staff, but we're envisaging a mixed mode of delivery utilising online resources, teaching activities, lectures and seminars in combination with practical sessions on campus where feasible and beneficial to the learning experience, and the small scale personal tutoring things I think will probably occur on campus as well.
Yeah, Ben's exactly right on that. On the Unibuddy chat, I've put a link to some really useful university statements about how we're going to deal with things starting this academic year. I think absolutely safety is paramount. We're also aware that these are practical subjects, so there will be practical components to the teaching. And one thing that's worth noting is that actually, even during the lockdown, archaeology and forensics were still carrying on. So I worked with a number of professional archaeologists, and for them it was not exactly business as usual because they had to have social distancing and PPE on site and so on, but archaeological excavations were still going on. Because we're linked to the building industry and building was still going on, it was really important that the archaeology was also considered in that period. So I think we'll be able to adapt ideas from that. Yeah. Is there anything else in the questions? I'm just trying to catch up on the questions.
There's one from Olivia who's asking about the potential impact of COVID on competition of applicant places.
It's a real unknown. I think would be fair to say. The press say that what may happen is that students will defer entry from this year to next year, which will make it much more difficult to get in next year. Now, it's really hard to know, but I've been talking to applicants over the last couple of weeks. As the UCAS deadline has come up, we've been chatting to people about their applications, and almost everybody I have spoken to has said, actually, I want to come this year. Some of that is based on, actually, I've had 3 months at home with my parents, and now what I want to do is move on to the next stage of my life. There are people who thought that they would take a year out, who now realise that actually probably a year travelling or a year trying to build up some money is going to be really difficult, and that actually the best place to be for the next 3 years or 4 years might be in university. So I think it swings and roundabouts, and it's very hard to predict, and I think universities all over the country are trying to predict it. Sorry, I should say, without choking, there's quite a lot of flexibility about arrival. Sorry, about arrival times if you're coming from overseas, particularly over when you start the course. If you've got difficulty travelling and getting the paperwork sorted, we've got people who can help with that side of things. Yeah. Anything else while I choke? Yeah.
Cathy, there's a question that's literally just come in about applying for the MA, and can they send applications for those directly?
Right. Yes.
But if you can see that.
Yes, I'm having problems scrolling through the questions. So the MA, I don't know if whoever put that on was in the talk about, we had a talk this morning about postgraduate and postgraduate applications. But don't worry if you didn't, I'm sure you can, I think they're recorded, so I'm sure you can catch up on that. Yes, we're still taking applications to masters for 2020 start. And there's actually some funding opportunities for masters that are still open for start this academic year. And what I'd suggest is pop over to Unibuddy, have a bit of a chat with us about course-specific requirements, and see if that's the right course for you. Masters, we tend to take, broadly speaking, we take about as many master students as we do undergraduates. So masters is a really big part of our environment. So it's a really nice group actually, because you get to join a lot of international students with lots of different backgrounds at postgraduate level. and it's quite informal, so the best way is to chat to the person who runs the course that you're interested in, to get a bit more detail on that. Yeah. Are there any other questions I haven't managed to answer? I think not.
I think that's it so far, Cathy. I think that's
Question about IELTS. Except all I can say, all I can say about IELTS is that's something we need to ask the admissions office. We're aware that people coming in who needed IELTS qualifications, English language qualifications, often those have been cancelled. So that makes it really tricky. And I think there will be some way of meeting those requirements differently. But that's something we'd need to talk about on a case-by-case basis with the admissions department. Right, I think I've run out of my time, which is perfect. So what I'm going to do now is head over to UniBuddy, and the link is just there at the bottom of the chat. So both Ben and I will be over in UniBuddy and happy to chat to you. And also over in UniBuddy, we have Magdalena, who's a final year student doing the Forensic Archaeology and Anthropology course. So she can tell you a lot about what that course is like. And Andrea, who's an MSc student on the MSc in Archaeological Sciences. And again, she can tell you a bit about what it's like to study that course. So hope to see you over on UniBuddy. Right, bye for now.